A silent world can be the loneliest place, especially when every gaze carries judgment and every whispered remark cuts deeper than any blade. Tonight, a young woman stands at the edge of a glittering society that refuses to see her worth, unaware that a single encounter will challenge everything she has been taught to fear. And somewhere among the shifting shadows, a powerful man begins to question the walls he built around his own heart. A secret is stirring, a choice is forming, and destiny is preparing to speak in a language neither of them expected. Before we begin, tell me, from where are you listening? And what do you love most about period romances? In the dim glow of gas lamps, flickering against the velvet curtains of a grand New York ballroom, Evelyn Whittaker stood alone, her world a silent symphony of swirling gowns and shadowed faces. The year was 1885, and the Gilded Age pulsed with the rhythm of fortunes made and broken. But for Evelyn, at 22 years old, the music that filled the air was nothing more than a distant vibration under her feet, a cruel reminder of the silence that had stolen her hearing in childhood fever. She adjusted the lace collar of her modest cornflower blue gown, the fabric whispering against her skin like a secret she couldn't share. Her dark curls were pinned with simple pearl combs, a far cry from the diamond tiaras adorning the debutantes around her. Evelyn's family had scraped together the invitation to this Vanderbilt soiree, hoping against hope that some eligible bachelor might overlook her flaw. Deaf. The word hung over her like a storm cloud, unspoken yet deafening in its judgment. From across the room, whispers slithered like serpents. Poor girl. One matron murmured to her companion, fanning herself with ostrich feathers, "Lovely face, but what use is beauty without ears? No man wants a wife who can't hear the cries of their children or the words of her husband." Evelyn's cheeks burned. She read lips with practiced ease, her green eyes sharp as cut glass, but the cruelty cut deeper than any blade. Her father, Mr. Whittaker, a struggling merchant with salt and pepper whiskers and a threadbare waistcoat, hovered nearby, his face etched with worry. He had brought her here on a desperate whim, believing the opulence of high society might blind someone to her silence. "Smile, my dear," he had signed earlier that evening, his hands trembling. "Let them see your spirit." But spirits wilted under such scrutiny. As the orchestra struck up a waltz, strings soaring invisibly to Evelyn, couples glided onto the floor. She watched, heart aching as young women her age were swept into arms, their laughter a phantom echo. One suitor, a lanky heir named Clarence, had approached her once before at a smaller gathering. His eyes had lit with interest until she confessed her condition. Now he danced with another, stealing glances her way with pitying smirks. Evelyn slipped toward the French doors, seeking the cool night air of the terrace. The city sprawled below, a glittering beast of iron and ambition, where tycoons like Cornelius Vanderbilt and John D. Rockefeller built empires on steel rails and oil wells. She wondered if even they could buy silence away. Leaning against the balustrade, she traced the stars with her gaze, willing the night to swallow her isolation. Inside, the party churned on. Enter Theodore Langston, the enigmatic railroad magnate whose name evoked both awe and envy. At 35, he cut a striking figure in his tailored black frock coat, broad shoulders filling the space like a force of nature. His dark hair was neatly combed, a neatly trimmed beard framing a jaw set with determination. Whispers followed him too, not of pity, but of power. He had risen from humble Pennsylvania roots to command vast tracts of the Union Pacific, amassing a fortune that rivaled the Astors. Yet Theodore sought no wife among the simpering socialites. His heart, scarred by a lost love in his youth, armored itself against vulnerability. Tonight he attended out of obligation, nursing a glass of brandy as he surveyed the room, His blue eyes, sharp and assessing, landed on the empty spot where Evelyn had stood. A servant mentioned the Whittaker girl, the deaf one, had stepped out. Theodore's brow furrowed. He had heard the rumors, families parading flawed daughters like damaged goods. Intrigued by the injustice, he moved toward the terrace, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. The door creaked open behind Evelyn, but she didn't hear it. She felt the shift in the air, a subtle warmth at her back. Turning, she met his gaze. Theodore stood there, silhouetted against the lamplight, his presence commanding yet curiously gentle. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he raised a hand in a tentative wave, as if testing the waters of an unknown sea. Evelyn froze, her pulse quickening. Who was this man, bold enough to approach where others fled? She studied his lips, ready to decipher, but he surprised her by signing, clumsy, halting gestures for good evening. Her eyes widened. No one in this glittering world had ever bothered to learn even the basics of her language. I saw you leave, he said slowly, enunciating clearly so she could read his words. His voice, deep and resonant, was lost on her, but the effort in his expression spoke volumes. The air inside grows stifling. May I join you? Evelyn nodded, a spark igniting in her chest. For the first time that night, someone saw her, not as broken but as whole. They stood in companionable silence, the city's hum bridging their worlds. Theodore glanced at her, captivated by the quiet strength in her posture, the way her eyes held stories untold. As the waltz faded inside, he turned to her fully. I'm Theodore Langston, he signed again, improving with each motion. And you deserve more than shadows. Evelyn's hand trembled as she replied in sign, her fingers dancing. Evelyn Whittaker, why do you know my language? A shadow crossed his face, hinting at secrets buried deep. Because silence, he said aloud, mouthing carefully, has taught me its own lessons. But as they spoke, a figure watched from the doorway. Clarence, his face twisted in jealousy, plotting to unravel this unexpected connection before it could bloom. Little did Evelyn know, the night that began in isolation was about to forge a bond that would shake the foundations of her silent world. The morning after the Vanderbilt soiree dawned crisp and golden over New York City, the kind of light that promised new beginnings, but often delivered harsh realities. Evelyn Whittaker awoke in her family's modest brownstone on the outskirts of Manhattan, the vibrations of carriage wheels rumbling through the floorboards like a distant drum. She sat up in her narrow bed, the simple cotton nightgown shifting against her skin, and pressed her fingers to the windowpane. The world outside moved in silent fury, vendors hawking wares, horses clopping along cobblestone streets. But to her, it was a ballet without sound, graceful yet isolating. Her mind replayed the night before, fragment by fragment. That man on the terrace, Theodore Langston, his clumsy signs, the way his blue eyes held no pity, only curiosity. No one had ever learned even a gesture for her sake. She touched her lips, remembering how he'd spoken slowly, deliberately, as if each word was a bridge across her void. A flush crept up her neck. Was it real, or just the haze of champagne and chandeliers? Downstairs, her father paced the parlor, his boots scuffing the worn Persian rug. Mr. Whittaker, at 50 years old, carried the weight of failed ventures in his stooped shoulders and the lines around his eyes. A merchant of dry goods, he'd clawed his way from Pennsylvania farms to this teetering perch in the city, only to watch debts mount like snowdrifts. Evelyn, he signed as she entered, his hands quick and familiar. Did you enjoy the evening? Any prospects? She hesitated, pouring tea from a chipped porcelain pot. The steam rose in lazy curls, warming her face. How to explain the spark without raising hopes? It was kind, she signed back, her movements fluid, graceful, from years of practice. "A gentleman spoke to me, truly spoke." Her father's face lit up, a rare smile cracking his worry. "Who? Tell me everything." Before she could respond, a sharp rap echoed at the door. Evelyn felt it more than heard, the insistent thud travelling up her arm as she gripped the table. Her younger brother, Samuel, a lanky boy of 16 with freckles and a mop of unruly hair, dashed to answer. In stepped Clarence Hargrove, impeccably dressed in a grey morning coat and striped trousers, his blonde moustache twitching with forced charm. At 24, he was the son of a minor banker, his family's wealth modest, but their ambitions vast. Last night's jealousy still simmered in his narrow eyes. "Miss Whittaker," Clarence said, bowing slightly, his voice carrying clear enough for her to read from across the room. He held a bouquet of hothouse roses, their petals a defiant red against the drab parlour. "I hope I'm not intruding. I saw you last night. You seemed in need of fresh air. Allow me to make amends with these." Evelyn's stomach twisted. She'd glimpsed his smirks before, the way he'd retreated after learning of her deafness. "Now this?" Her father beamed, ushering Clarence to a seat. "Mr. Hargrove, what an honour. Evelyn, isn't it thoughtful?" She forced a polite nod, signing to her father. "Why is he here?" But Mr. Whittaker waved it off, eager for any suitor. Clarence sat, crossing his legs with practised ease. "Your father mentioned your unique talents," he said, enunciating overly, as if she were a child. "I find it fascinating. A lady who observes the world so keenly. Perhaps we could take a promenade in Central Park. The leaves are turning, a sight not to be missed." Evelyn studied his lips, searching for sincerity. There was none, just calculation. She knew his type. Men who collected flaws like curiosities, only to discard them when the novelty faded. "Thank you," she replied in writing on a small slate she kept nearby, her pencil scratching firmly. "But I have commitments today." Clarence's smile faltered, but he pressed on. "Nonsense. A walk would do you good, and me, the pleasure of your company." He leaned forward, his cologne sharp and overpowering, like the false sweetness of the roses. Across town, in the marble-floored expanse of his Fifth Avenue mansion, Theodore Langston stared at the breakfast tray untouched before him. The tycoon, whose empire spanned railroads from Chicago to the Pacific, felt an unfamiliar restlessness. His valet, a stoic Englishman named Hargreaves, adjusted the silverware with quiet efficiency. Theodore, in his silk robe over a crisp shirt, ran a hand through his dark hair. At 35, he'd built walls higher than any trestle bridge. After Eliza, his first love, perished in a cholera outbreak years ago, taking his faith in tenderness with her. Yet Evelyn's face haunted him, her green eyes fierce and unguarded. He'd learned basic signs from a deaf cousin in his youth, dusty lessons forgotten until last night. Why her? Why now? A knock interrupted his thoughts. His secretary, Mr. Ellis, a bespectacled man in his 40s, with ink-stained fingers, entered. "Sir, the Whittaker invitation. Shall I accept for the charity luncheon tomorrow?" Theodore paused, fork midway to his mouth. "Yes, and inquire about Miss Evelyn Whittaker. Discreetly." Ellis nodded, retreating. Theodore rose, pacing to the window overlooking the chaos of carriages and pedestrians. The city thrummed with opportunity, but for him it echoed with what-ifs. He wouldn't pursue lightly, no scandals for a man of his stature. But something in her silence called to his own, buried quiet. Back at the Whittaker home, Clarence lingered, regaling Mr. Whittaker with tales of bank investments, his eyes flicking to Evelyn with possessive glints. She excused herself to the kitchen, heart pounding. Through the doorway, she saw Samuel mimic Clarence's pompous gestures behind his back, drawing a silent laugh from her, a brief spark of humour amid the tension. As Clarence finally departed, promising to return, Evelyn's father signed excitedly. He's interested, Evelyn. A match like that could secure us. But she shook her head, doubt clouding her features. Father, he's not kind. Not truly. That afternoon, a messenger arrived with a sealed note. Evelyn's hands trembled as she opened it. In elegant script, Miss Whittaker, I enjoyed our terrace conversation. Might I call upon you soon? Theodore Langston. Her breath caught. Hope flickered. Fragile as a candle flame. But as she folded the paper, a shadow fell across the sill. Clarence, lingering outside, watching the delivery with narrowed eyes. He turned away, a plan forming in the recesses of his mind, one that would test the budding trust between a deaf girl and a tycoon before it could take root. Little did they know, Clarence's whispers would soon reach ears in high places, twisting admiration into suspicion and threatening to derail their fragile connection forever. The afternoon sun slanted through the lace curtains of the Whittaker parlour, casting intricate patterns on the faded wallpaper like whispers of forgotten dreams. Evelyn clutched Theodore's note in her hand, the paper crisp and scented faintly with sandalwood. Her heart raced, a silent thunder in her chest. She traced the elegant loops of his handwriting, each letter a promise of something unforeseen. Father had retreated to his ledgers in the study, oblivious to the storm brewing within her. Samuel, ever the mischievous shadow, peeked from the hallway, his eyes wide with curiosity. She slipped the note into her bodice, next to her heart, and moved to the mirror above the mantel. Her reflection stared back, a young woman in a simple grey day dress of wool, high-necked and modest, with a cameo brooch at her throat. No frills for the daughter of a merchant on the edge of ruin. But today, her green eyes sparkled with a rare light. Theodore Langston. The name alone evoked ballrooms and boardrooms. Power woven into steel tracks that spanned the nation. Why her? A deaf girl from the fringes of society? A vibration rattled the floorboards, heavy footsteps on the stoop. Evelyn turned, alert. Through the window, she saw Clarence Hargrove again, his grey coat dusted with street grit, a determined set to his jaw. He knocked sharply, the impact jolting the glass. Samuel opened the door, but Evelyn stepped forward, signing to her brother to let him in. No escaping now. Miss Whittaker, Clarence said, his voice booming as he entered, hat in hand. He enunciated each syllable with exaggerated care, as if addressing a foreigner. I couldn't stay away. Your father's hospitality last time was so welcoming. Might we speak privately? Evelyn's stomach knotted. She glanced at Samuel, who hovered protectively but nodded toward the small side garden. Better out there, under the open sky, than trapped inside. They stepped onto the gravel path, bordered by overgrown rose bushes heavy with late blooms. The air carried the scent of earth and distant coal smoke from the factories. Clarence offered his arm, but she walked alone, her posture straight, chin lifted. I've been thinking about you, he began, his lips moving slowly. Last night at the soirée you seemed distant, but I see potential. My family has connections. A match with me could elevate your circumstances. Imagine, no more scraping by. She stopped, pulling her slate from her pocket. The pencil flew across it. Gratitude for your interest, Mr. Hargrove. But my heart seeks kindness, not elevation. Clarence's smile tightened, his moustache quivering. He leaned closer, his breath warm on her face. Kindness? In this city? You're naive, Evelyn. Men like Langston, they toy with novelties. A tycoon wants an heir, not a silent wife. I, however, see your value. Let me prove it. Her cheeks flushed with anger. She read the condescension in his eyes, the way he scanned her like merchandise. Before she could write more, a carriage rumbled to a halt outside the gate. Evelyn felt the wheel's vibration first, then saw the polished black landau, emblazoned with the Langston crest. A silver rail crossing a golden horizon. Her pulse quickened. Theodore emerged, tall and commanding in a charcoal suit, his frock coat buttoned precisely. He carried a small parcel wrapped in brown paper tied with twine. Clarence straightened, his face paling. "What is this?" he muttered, but Evelyn ignored him, hurrying to the gate. Theodore's blue eyes met hers, softening at the edges. He signed with more confidence now. "Hello again," his large hands forming the shapes deliberately. Then, aloud, slowly, "I brought something for our conversation." Evelyn's fingers itched to respond. She signed back, "Welcome. Join us?" But Clarence interjected, stepping forward with forced joviality. "Mr. Langston, an unexpected pleasure. I'm Clarence Hargrove. We were just discussing family matters." Theodore's gaze flicked to Clarence, cool and assessing, like a businessman eyeing a rival bid. "Mr. Hargrove, I've heard of your father's bank. Miss Whittaker, if I may?" He extended the parcel, ignoring the intruder. Inside was a leather-bound book. The Silent World, a collection of essays on deaf experiences, printed in 1883. Evelyn's breath hitched. Pages marked with notes in Theodore's hand, translations into basic signs illustrated crudely. "To learn more," he said, mouthing clearly, "if you'll teach me." Tears pricked her eyes. No one had ever bridged her silence like this. Clarence watched, his fists clenching at his sides. A book? How quaint. But books don't pay debts, sir. The Whittakers need stability, not gestures. Theodore turned, his voice steady but edged with steel. "Stability comes in many forms, Hargrove. Some men build it with words, others with whispers behind backs." Evelyn felt the tension crackle, like lightning before a storm. She signed rapidly to Theodore. "Thank you. This means everything." Her hands trembling with emotion. He nodded, a faint smile breaking through his reserve, revealing a dimple she'd not noticed before. Clarence excused himself abruptly, stalking off with a curt bow. But as he vanished around the corner, Evelyn caught a glimpse of him pausing, speaking urgently to a newsboy, perhaps sending a message or worse, spreading tales. Theodore lingered in the garden, the book open between them. They sat on a wrought-iron bench, Evelyn demonstrating signs for emotions: joy, sorrow, love. His attempts were earnest, fumbling yet tender, drawing a soft laugh from her when he mixed up happy with hungry. The sun dipped lower, painting their faces in warm hues. For the first time, Evelyn felt seen, not as a burden, but as a woman with a voice of her own. Yet, as twilight crept in, a servant from Theodore's household approached on foot, breathless. He handed over a folded missive, urgent lines creasing his brow. Theodore read it silently, his expression darkening. "Trouble at the rails," he murmured, then signed to her. "I must go. But tomorrow, the park, at noon." She nodded, hope blooming like the roses around them. He departed, the carriage fading into the evening bustle. Alone, Evelyn pressed the book to her chest. But unease stirred. Clarence's parting glare lingered in her mind, a shadow promising interference, whispers of Theodore's past, rumors of a jilted engagement, a fortune built on ruthless deals, began to surface in her thoughts. What if Clarence unearthed something to poison this fragile trust? That night, as gas lamps flickered to life across the city, Clarence Hargrove sat in a dimly lit club on Broadway, nursing a whiskey. He penned a letter to an old acquaintance in the press, words dripping with insinuation, a tycoon's interest in a defective heiress, a scandal waiting to unfold. The Gilded Age thrived on secrets, and he intended to wield this one like a blade. The next morning brought a chill wind off the Hudson, rattling the shutters of the Whittaker brownstone like impatient fingers. Evelyn rose early, The book's weight still a comfort under her pillow. She dressed in her best walking gown, a soft lavender muslin with leg-of-mutton sleeves and a modest bustle, the skirt brushing her ankles in gentle folds. A straw bonnet, trimmed with silk ribbons, waited on the hook, ready for the park. Her hands moved with purpose as she signed to her reflection, "Today, courage." Downstairs, her father sipped coffee from a tin mug, his newspaper spread wide. Mr. Whitaker's eyes, shadowed by sleepless nights, brightened at her entrance. "The park, eh? With Mr. Langston?" He signed back, his gestures broad and encouraging. "Be careful, child. Men of his world play deep games." Evelyn nodded, squeezing his arm. Samuel bounded in, his schoolboy cap askew, mimicking Theodore's signs from yesterday with exaggerated flair. "Hungry, happy," he signed, twisting the motions into a comical knot. Evelyn stifled a laugh, the soundless bubble of joy easing the knot in her chest. Her brother, with his quick wit and boundless energy, was her anchor in this silent sea. By noon, Central Park unfolded like a green oasis amid the stone jungle. Carriages lined the paths, their wheels crunching gravel under iron-rimmed tires. Ladies in elaborate promenades, hats, strolled arm in arm, parasols twirling against the sun. Evelyn arrived on foot, the vibrations of the city fading into the softer hum of birds and leaves. She spotted Theodore near the Bethesda fountain, his tall frame unmistakable in a navy wool suit, the chain of a gold pocket watch glinting across his vest. He paced slowly, scanning the crowds, a small bouquet of wildflowers clutched in one hand, daisies and forget-me-nots, simple and unpretentious. His face lit when he saw her, and he approached with that deliberate stride, signing, "You're here," before speaking the words aloud, clear and unhurried. Evelyn's heart fluttered. She signed back. "I wouldn't miss it," her fingers light, almost playful. They walked the winding paths, the fountain's spray misting the air like a cool veil. Theodore held the bouquet out, his cheeks colouring faintly under the beard. "For you. They reminded me of your eyes, clear, resilient." He mouthed the words slowly, watching her lips form a silent "thank you." As they settled on a bench overlooking the lake, rowboats gliding silently across the water, Evelyn opened the book he'd given her. She pointed to a passage, signing explanations while he followed, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This part," she wrote on her slate, "speaks of worlds within silence, like mine." Theodore leaned in, their shoulders brushing, a fleeting warmth that sent a shiver through her. "I've read it twice now," he confessed, enunciating carefully. "Your world, it's not empty. It's full of what others miss." His voice, though unheard, carried sincerity in its rhythm. He attempted a new sign she'd taught him yesterday, gratitude, his large hands forming it awkwardly, drawing her smile. For a moment, the park's bustle vanished. It was just them, building a language of glances and gestures, but shadows lingered. Across the lake, Clarence Hargrove lurked near a cluster of oaks, his silk top hat pulled low. He'd followed her, driven by that festering envy. Yesterday's letter to the press was sent, but words on paper weren't enough. He needed proof, something to smear the Tycoon's name and claim Evelyn as his trophy. Spotting them, he edged closer, hiding behind a thicket, his notebook ready. Theodore sensed the shift, his eyes narrowing. "Someone watches," he murmured, scanning the tree line. Evelyn followed his gaze, spotting a flicker of movement. Her pulse quickened, not fear, but defiance. She signed, "Ignore. This is ours." He nodded, turning back to her. "Tell me about your childhood," he said slowly. "The fever. How did you endure?" Evelyn hesitated, then wrote, "Lost sound at 7. Learned to read faces, hands. Father taught me strength." She signed the last word with emphasis, her eyes locking on his. Theodore reached out, hesitating, before covering her hand with his. Warm, steady. Strength like yours. It's rare. I've built empires, but faced my own silences. After Eliza died. He trailed off, the name hanging like mist. I closed off. Until you. The confession hung between them, intimate as a shared breath. Evelyn's free hand signed, I'm sorry, but he shook his head. Don't be. You remind me life's not just rails and ledgers. A soft breeze stirred the wildflowers in her lap, and for the first time she imagined a future where silence wasn't solitude. Clarence's pencil scratched furiously from his hiding spot, capturing the moment. The Tycoon's hand on hers, the flowers, the unguarded smiles. Scandalous, he whispered to himself, a smirk curling his lips. This would sell papers, the iron-fisted magnate dallying with a deaf merchant's daughter, unfit for society. But as he slipped away, a newsboy bumped into him, scattering his notes into the dirt. Cursing under his breath, Clarence scrambled to retrieve them, unaware that the boy, sharp-eyed and streetwise, pocketed one page, perhaps to sell to a higher bidder. Back on the bench, Theodore rose reluctantly. I have a meeting at the exchange, he signed and said. But Sunday? A drive to the countryside. Fresh air, away from prying eyes. Evelyn beamed, signing yes, her heart soaring. As he departed, tipping his hat with a lingering look, she lingered by the fountain, tracing patterns in the water with a stick. Hope bloomed, fragile yet fierce. That evening in the Whittaker parlour, Evelyn shared the day's joy with her father over supper. Simple bread, cheese and stew from the market. Mr. Whittaker signed proudly. He's a good man, I think. Samuel added a joke, pantomiming Theodore's signs, lightening the room. But as night fell, a knock shattered the peace. The messenger bore a telegram for Mr. Whittaker, urgent business from a creditor, demanding payment by dawn. Panic etched her father's face. Evelyn's mind raced, debts mounting, Clarence's intrusions, Theodore's world colliding with theirs. Was this coincidence or the first thread of a web tightening around them? Across town, Theodore pored over rail maps in his study, the gaslight casting long shadows. A servant delivered a whispered report. Rumours stirring in the clubs, whispers of his eccentric interest in Miss Whittaker. His jaw set. He'd protect this, whatever the cost. But Clarence's scheme was gaining steam, a locomotive barreling toward collision. The telegram's ink blurred under Mr. Whittaker's trembling fingers, the stark words demanding $500 by sunrise or face seizure of their stock. Evelyn watched her father's face crumple, the lines deepening like cracks in parched earth. She signed urgently, "What now? We have 200 saved." Her hands cut through the air, sharp with worry. Samuel hovered nearby, his young face pale, fists clenched as if he could punch away the threat. Mr. Whittaker slumped into his armchair, the springs creaking under his weight. "The creditors are shark from the docks. If we lose the warehouse—" He trailed off, signing wearily. Evelyn's mind whirled. Their dry goods business teetered on bolts of calico and barrels of flour, dreams stitched from modest threads. Theodore's world of vast fortunes felt a universe away, yet his note burned in her pocket like a talisman. She rose, determination hardening her gaze. "I'll speak to him tomorrow. Theodore might know lenders." But her father shook his head, eyes glistening. "No, child. Don't entangle him yet. We're Whittakers. We stand alone." The words stung, a reminder of their fragile pride. As the clock's pendulum swung silently, tick after unseen tick, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling's water stains. Sleep evaded her, chased by visions of eviction and Theodore's gentle signs fading into the city's indifferent roar. Dawn broke with a grey drizzle pattering the windows, turning the streets to slick mirrors. Evelyn donned her woolen cloak over the lavender gown, the hood framing her face like a veil. She slipped out before the household stirred, heading to the waterfront warehouses where her father's dealings tangled with rougher elements. The air thickened with salt and fish, carts rumbling past, laden with crates. Vibrations from shouting stevedores travelled up her boots, but their faces told the tale, harried, desperate. At the creditor's office, a squat building wedged between fishmongers, she waited in line behind weathered sailors. The man himself, Mr. Grady, emerged at last, a burly Irishman with a scarred cheek and mutton-chop whiskers, his vest straining over her ample belly. He eyed her up and down, lips moving in a gruff query she read easily. "Miss Whittaker come to beg?" She pulled her slate, writing boldly, "Time. Father needs until month's end. We'll pay interest." Grady snorted, crossing his arms. "Interest? Your pa's late twice over. 500 now, or I take the keys." His gestures were crude, mocking her silence with exaggerated waves. Evelyn's cheeks burned, but she held firm, signing pleas with steady hands. He leaned in, breath sour with tobacco. "Pretty thing, but deaf as a post. Run home. This ain't for ladies." Humiliation coiled in her gut, but she straightened. "1 week," she wrote, underlining it. Grady's laugh boomed, drawing stares. Before he could retort, a shadow fell across the doorway. Theodore Langston stepped in, rain beading on his oilskin coat, his presence sucking the air from the cramped space. How had he known? A servant's whisper, perhaps, or his network of eyes in the city. "Grady," Theodore said, voice low and commanding, enunciating for her. "The Whittaker debt is mine now. Name your terms." The creditor blinked, recognition dawning like a slow fuse. "Mr. Langston, this ain't your affair." But Theodore's blue eyes iced over, his stance unyielding. He pulled a leather pouch from his coat, coins clinking heavily. 550, paid in full. No more collections. Grady's greed warred with caution. He pocketed the gold, muttering thanks before slinking away. Evelyn turned to Theodore, her slate forgotten, signing "Why, How," with rapid, grateful strokes. He smiled faintly, that dimple flashing. "Your father mentioned debts in passing yesterday. I couldn't let it stand. Walk with me?" They emerged into the drizzle, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers around them. Theodore hailed a hansom cab, the horse's hooves splashing puddles. Inside the dim interior, the world blurred to streaks of grey. He signed slowly, "I know loss. Won't watch yours." Evelyn's hand brushed his as she replied, "Gratitude isn't enough." Their eyes met, the air charged with unspoken warmth. The cab rattled toward Central Park, a detour he suggested for respite. Under the park's dripping oaks, they shared a bench, the rain a soft curtain. Theodore unwrapped a parcel, fresh scones from a baker still warm. He broke one, offering half, their fingers lingering. "Tell me more of your signs," he said, mouthing clearly. Evelyn demonstrated trust, her hand curving gently over her heart. He mirrored it, his touch accidental yet electric. Laughter bubbled silently when he botched "rain," signing something closer to "dance." The moment stretched, intimate, the city's clamour muffled, but peace shattered as Clarence Hargrove appeared on the path, umbrella in hand, his face a mask of feigned surprise. "Miss Whittaker, Mr. Langston, what a coincidence." His eyes darted to their closeness, venom glinting. Theodore stiffened, positioning himself slightly between them. "Hargrove, stalking promenades now?" Clarence chuckled, low and oily, merely enjoying the weather. Heard rumours, though, tycoons playing benefactor to merchants' daughters. The papers might find it. Intriguing. He tipped his hat, sauntering off, but not before Evelyn caught the triumphant curl of his lip. Theodore's jaw tightened. "Ignore him. He's a gnat." Yet doubt seeded in Evelyn's chest. As they parted at her door, his goodbye sign lingering on her palm, she confided in Samuel that evening. Her brother signed back, "He's jealous, but father's safe now." Mr. Whittaker, debt-lifted, embraced her with rare fervour, whispering thanks to the empty air. Night deepened, gas lamps hissing to life. In his club, Clarence met a shady journalist sliding across a crumpled note from the park, the one the newsboy had sold him. "Print it," he hissed. "Langston's folly with the deaf girl. Make it scandal." The ink would spread like ink in water, threatening to drown their budding light. Evelyn dreamed that night of rails, stretching endless, Theodore's hand in hers. But awakening to a knock at dawn, she found a folded broadsheet on the step, headlines screaming of the Tycoon's pity dalliance. Her heart plummeted. The web tightened and Clarence's blade hovered ready to strike. The scandal sheet crumpled in Evelyn's fist as she stood on the Whittaker stoop, the morning mist clinging to her nightgown like a shroud. The headline's bold type screamed across the page, "Railroad King Court's silence, Langston's pity play with deaf debutante." Whispers of fabrication laced every line, claims of Theodore's charitable whims and her tragic allure, twisted into a tale of folly unfit for polite society. Her cheeks burned, not from shame, but fury at the poison penned in Clarence's shadow. Samuel appeared at the door, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his nightshirt rumpled. He signed quickly, "What is it?" Evelyn thrust the paper at him, her hands slashing the air. "Lies, all lies." Inside, Mr. Whittaker snatched the broadsheet, his face draining to ash. This will ruin us. And him." He paced the parlour, boots thudding against the floorboards, vibrations that set Evelyn's teeth on edge. The debt was paid, but scandal was a thief that stole reputations whole. She signed back, firm and unyielding. "We fight it. Theodore will know the truth." Her father paused, worry etching deeper furrows in his brow. At 50, he'd weathered market crashes and fevers, but this struck at the heart, the fragile hope she'd dared to nurture. By midday, the city buzzed with the story. Carriages splashed through puddles on Fifth Avenue, but inside Theodore's mansion, the air hung heavy as lead. He crushed the same paper in his study, the oak-panelled walls closing in like a vice. Hargreaves, his valet, cleared his throat softly. "Sir, the board meets at 2. This distraction could sway votes on the Pacific extension." Theodore's blue eyes stormed, his beard shadowing a clenched jaw. At 35, he'd crushed competitors and outbid rivals, but this personal barb cut fresh. Eliza's ghost had taught him isolation. Evelyn's light had cracked it open. Now, Clarence's venom threatened to seal it shut again. He penned a note swiftly, sealing it with wax. "Meet me at the old oak in the park, noon tomorrow. We face this together. T.L." A boy delivered it to the Whittaker door, vanishing into the throng of vendors and clerks. Evelyn read it alone in her room, the words a lifeline amid the chaos. She folded it carefully, pressing it to her lips. Trust. The sign she'd taught him echoed in her mind, her hand curving over her heart. The next day dawned sharper, the autumn chill biting through Evelyn's woolen shawl as she hurried to Central Park. Leaves crunched underfoot, gold and crimson carpets leading to the ancient oak, its branches gnarled like watchful sentinels. Theodore waited, his greatcoat billowing in the wind, a wool scarf at his neck. No bouquet today, just resolve in his stance. He spotted her signing "here" with broad, steady hands, then mouthing the words slowly. Relief washed over his features, softening the tension. Evelyn approached, her green eyes searching his. She signed rapidly. "The paper. It's Clarence. He watches, twists everything." Theodore nodded, pulling a second note from his pocket, his own rebuttal, drafted for the press, but held back. "I know. My men traced the leak to his club, but words won't silence him." He spoke clearly, his voice a rumble lost to her, but visible in the deliberate shape of his lips. They sat on a fallen log nearby, the park's paths emptying as gossip kept society indoors. She wrote on her slate, "They call me pity. You fool, but I see you, strong kind." Her pencil trembled slightly, emotion bleeding into the ink. Theodore covered her hand with his, the warmth seeping through gloves. "And I see you, brave, whole. This changes nothing." He attempted her sign for whole, his fingers brushing hers in the motion, lingering a beat too long. A spark jumped between them, silent yet electric, the wind whispering through the oak like approval. For a moment they forgot the storm. Evelyn demonstrated a new sign, endure, her hands forming a fist that opened to the sky. Theodore mirrored it, his attempt earnest, drawing her silent smile. He leaned closer, the scent of his cologne, sandalwood and leather, mingling with the earth's damp breath. "I've faced strikes, crashes," he said slowly, "but this, protecting you, it's worth more than rails." Her eyes misted, and she signed together, linking their hands in the gesture, palms pressing firm. But the idyll fractured. Footsteps crunched nearby, Clarence striding from the tree line, his overcoat flapping like a cape. Two burly men flanked him, likely hired muscle from the docks, their faces rough with stubble and scar. "Langston!" Clarence called, enunciating with mock clarity, his moustache curling in triumph. "Fancy meeting you here, defending your charity case?" Evelyn rose, positioning beside Theodore, her chin high. Clarence's eyes raked over her, possessive and cruel. "Miss Whittaker, come now. This tycoon's games will drag you down. Marry respectability, me." Theodore stepped forward, his frame towering, voice edged like steel. "Leave, Hargrove. Your lies end today." But Clarence smirked, nodding to his men. They advanced, one grabbing Theodore's arm roughly. Chaos erupted in silent fury, fists flying, Evelyn dodging a swing, her slate clattering to the ground. Theodore broke free, landing a solid punch that sent one thug sprawling into the leaves. Clarence lunged at Evelyn, but she sidestepped, her heel catching his shin. He yelped, stumbling back. Park-goers scattered, a constable's whistle piercing the air from afar. The thugs fled, dragging a cursing Clarence with them. Theodore turned to Evelyn, breathless, a bruise blooming on his cheek. He signed safe. She nodded, touching the mark gently, her fingers tracing concern. "You fought for me," she signed, awe in her eyes. He pulled her close, just for a heartbeat, the embrace chaste yet profound. "Always." But as the constable approached, questions in his stern gaze, Theodore whispered to her, "Go home. I'll handle this." Evelyn hesitated, then slipped away, heart pounding with a mix of fear and fierce affection. That evening in the Whittaker parlour, she recounted the scuffle to her father and Samuel. Signs flying like arrows. Mr. Whittaker's worry deepened. "He's drawing fire to us all." Yet pride flickered in his eyes. His daughter, no longer the wallflower. Across town, Theodore dismissed the constable with a quiet bribe and a warning. But in his study, a new telegram arrived, board members demanding explanations, threats of divestment if the distraction persisted. Clarence's web spread further, whispers reaching Philadelphia financiers. Theodore stared at the fire, resolve hardening. He'd shield her, but at what cost to his empire? Evelyn lay awake, the oak's imagined shadow on her wall. Their bond strengthened in the fray, but Clarence's retreat felt too easy, a predator regrouping. What blade would he wield next to sever their silent vow forever? The evening shadows stretched long across the Whittaker brownstone, the gas lamps outside casting flickering pools of light on the uneven sidewalk. Evelyn sat by the parlour window, her fingers twisting the hem of her shawl, the wool fraying slightly under the pressure. The confrontation in the park replayed in her mind, the blur of motion, Theodore's protective stance, The way his hand had steadied her after the chaos. Bruises would form tomorrow, but the warmth of his touch lingered, a silent echo in her chest. She signed to herself absent-mindedly, tracing courage in the air, as if to summon it anew. Mr. Whittaker entered from the kitchen, carrying a tray of weak tea and biscuits, his steps deliberate to alert her. At 50, his frame had thinned from worry, his salt and pepper hair unkempt. He set the tray down and signed slowly, "Eat, you need strength." Samuel trailed behind, his youthful energy subdued, eyes darting with unspoken questions. The boy, 16 and lanky, mimicked a punch in the air, drawing a faint smile from Evelyn, but her father's face remained grave. That scuffle. It spreads like fire. Neighbors whisper already. She nodded, pouring tea that steamed silently before her. The scandal sheet from yesterday lay folded on the side table, its edges curled like dying leaves. Clarence's hand was clear in this, his jealousy a venom that poisoned everything it touched. Yet Theodore had fought, not with words alone, but with fists shielding her from the brutes. No man had ever done that. Her heart quickened at the memory of his embrace, brief and fierce, his breath warm against her temple. It wasn't pity, it was promise. Across the city, in the opulent glow of his Fifth Avenue study, Theodore Langston nursed a tumbler of bourbon, the amber liquid swirling as he paced the Persian rug. The bruise on his cheek throbbed, a dull reminder of the park's violence. Hargreaves had applied a cold compress earlier, his English reserve cracking with concern. "Sir, the board's telegram was clear. They demand discretion." Theodore waved him off, his broad shoulders tense under the silk dressing gown. At 35, he'd navigated strikes and sabotages, turning rusting tracks into golden veins. But this personal siege gnawed deeper. The telegram crinkled in his fist. Distraction imperils extension, resign interest or face vote. Philadelphia investors, scenting weakness, pulled strings from afar. Clarence's whispers had reached them, painting Theodore as a lovesick fool, dallying with a flawed match. He sank into the leather armchair, staring at the marble mantel where a miniature portrait of Eliza gathered dust. Her death had forged his armor. Evelyn was melting it. Those green eyes, fierce and unyielding, saw through his tycoon's mask to the man beneath. He set the glass down and practiced a sign she'd taught him. Protect. His large hands forming it with growing precision. For her, he'd bend rails if needed. A knock echoed. Mr. Ellis, his secretary, bespectacled and precise, entering with a stack of letters. "Sir, responses from the club. Hargrove's been boasting, claims you struck first, unprovoked." Theodore's jaw tightened, the beard shadowing his scowl. "Lies. Have the lawyers draft a countersuit. Slander, perhaps." Ellis nodded, retreating, but Theodore's mind raced. Suing Clarence would drag Evelyn into courtrooms, her silence dissected like evidence. No, he'd handle this quietly, as he did mergers, outmaneuver, not destroy outright. The next morning broke with a crisp frost rhyming the windows, the city awakening to vendors' calls that Evelyn felt as distant tremors. She dressed in a simple navy serge gown, the high collar buttoned to her throat, a woolen cape for the chill. Father insisted on accompanying her to the market, his arm linked with hers for support. "We shop light today," he signed, his gestures economical. "Bills wait." Samuel skipped ahead, bartering for apples with a street seller, his laughter a pantomime of joy that lightened Evelyn's step. But as they turned a corner near the dry goods stalls, Clarence appeared like a spectre, his grey overcoat impeccable, a silk scarf at his neck. His moustache twitched, eyes locking on Evelyn with predatory gleam. Mr. Whittaker stiffened, pulling her closer. "Hargrove," he said aloud, voice steady. Clarence bowed mockingly, then signed crudely, "Morning, family." his motions insulting, as if mocking her world. Evelyn's blood heated. She stepped forward, signing sharply, "Leave us!" Her hands cut the air, precise and defiant. Clarence chuckled, the sound visible in his shaking shoulders. "Feisty. But think, Miss Whittaker, Langston's board turns on him. Your little romance, it crumbles tracks." He leaned in, voice low and clear. "Marry me, save your father from ruin, or watch it all fall." Mr. Whittaker sputtered, "You dare threaten?" But Clarence's eyes bored into Evelyn, challenging. She pulled her slate, writing furiously, "Never! Your heart's as empty as your words." Tossing it at his feet, she turned, dragging her father away. Samuel stuck out his tongue behind Clarence's back, a spark of humour amid the fury. Yet Evelyn's pulse thundered. How deep did his reach go? Word of the encounter reached Theodore by noon, via a discreet note from a Whittaker neighbour. He cancelled a rail meeting, hailing a brougham to the brownstone. The horses' hooves clipped urgently on cobblestones, the city a blur of top-hatted men and crinoline skirts. Arriving, he found Evelyn in the garden, tending frost-kissed roses, her cape dusted with earth. She felt his approach, the gravel crunching, and turned, her face lighting despite the shadows under her eyes. Theodore signed, "I came," then spoke slowly. "Heard about the market. You're safe." She nodded, but her hands trembled as she replied, "He threatens your business because of me." He took her hands gently, the calluses from his youth on the farm rough against her soft skin. "No, because of him. We'll expose his games." Their fingers intertwined briefly, a silent vow, his thumb tracing her knuckles. The garden faded. It was just them, breaths mingling in the cold air. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, a simple gold locket engraved with a tiny rail motif. "For you." Inside, a note, "Endure together." Evelyn's eyes welled, opening it to read the words. She signed, "Thank you," pressing it to her heart. Theodore's gaze softened, drawing her nearer until their foreheads touched, a chaste intimacy that spoke volumes. "I've never felt this," he murmured clearly. "Not since. Before." But the moment shattered with a distant rumble, a carriage halting abruptly at the gate. Ellis dismounted, face ashen, waving a fresh telegram. Theodore read it, colour draining. "The board convenes tonight, ultimatum." He signed to Evelyn, "Stay strong, I return soon." As he departed, his eyes promised more than words. Evelyn clutched the locket, hope warring with dread. Clarence's threats echoed, but Theodore's gift anchored her. Yet that night, as stars pricked the sky, a shadowy figure slipped a note under the Whittaker door. "Choose me, or lose him forever." The web tightened, and dawn brought decisions that could shatter their silent world. The frost-laced dawn crept over the Whittaker brownstone like a thief, slipping through the cracks in the curtains to illuminate the crumpled note on the parlour floor. Evelyn knelt, her nightgown pooling around her knees, and unfolded the paper with steady hands. The scrawled words hit like a slap, "Choose me, or lose him forever." No signature, but the venomous slant screamed Clarence Hargrove. Her green eyes narrowed, anger coiling tight in her chest. She crumpled it, flames devouring the evidence in the hearth's dying embers. No more running. This ended today. Downstairs, Mr. Whittaker stirred the coals, his back hunched against the chill. At 50, the merchant's hands, calloused from years of ledger books and lost deals, moved with quiet resolve as he prepared porridge. Samuel, still tousle-haired from sleep, signed to her from the doorway. "Bad night?" Evelyn forced a nod, pocketing the locket Theodore had given her, the gold warm against her skin, a talisman of their shared endurance. She signed back, "Worse threats, but we face them." Her father turned, reading her expression like an open book. "The board's meeting tonight," he signed slowly, worry etching his brow. Langston's empire hangs by a thread because of us. Evelyn shook her head fiercely, her curls escaping their pins. Because of Clarence. I'll go to Theodore, warn him. Mr. Whittaker protested, but she was already moving, slipping into a grey woolen dress with a fitted bodice and full skirts that swished against the stairs. A fur-trimmed bonnet completed the armour, shielding her from the biting wind outside. The streets pulsed with early bustle, milk carts rattling, newsboys hawking headlines that still whispered of scandal. Evelyn hailed a hansom cab, the horse's breath steaming in the cold. The ride to Fifth Avenue blurred into a tapestry of iron fences and grand facades, her mind racing ahead. Theodore's world was marble and mahogany, hers, threadbare resilience, yet their connection bridged it all, gestures, glances, the slow bloom of trust. At the mansion gates a footman hesitated, but the locket's gleam at her throat, engraved with his rail motif, earned her passage. Inside, the foyer echoed with polished silence, crystal chandeliers catching the light like frozen stars. Hargreaves, the valet, appeared, his moustache twitching in surprise. "Miss Whittaker, the master is in conference." But Theodore's voice boomed from the study door. "Let her in!" He rose from behind a massive oak desk strewn with rail maps and telegrams, his navy suit rumpled from hours of strain. At 35, the Tycoon's broad frame carried the weight of battles won and lost, but his blue eyes lit at the sight of her. He signed, "You came," then mouthed the words clearly, crossing the room in 3 strides. Evelyn's heart stuttered. She signed back, "The note. Clarence threatens everything." She pulled the ashes remnant from her pocket, explaining in rapid signs and scrawled words on a fresh slate from his desk. Theodore's jaw clenched, the bruise from the park fading to yellow, but his resolve sharpening like a blade. "I suspected. My lawyers confirm his hand in the broadsheet, but the board—" He trailed off, gesturing to the telegram. Demands for his resignation if the personal entanglement persisted. Evelyn's fingers flew. "Don't let him win. We're stronger." He covered her hand, his touch lingering, warm and unyielding. "You are. I've built this on steel, but you teach me heart." They stood close, the study's fire crackling silently to her, its heat mirroring the flush on her cheeks. Theodore attempted a new sign she'd shown him in the garden, love, his large hands hesitant, forming the curve over his chest. It came out clumsy, but the intent hung between them. Intimate as a whisper, Evelyn's breath caught. She mirrored it perfectly, their palms brushing, eyes locking in a moment that stretched eternal. No words needed. The air thrummed with possibility, the slow fire of romance kindling brighter. But footsteps echoed in the hall, Mr. Ellis, breathless, clutching a sealed envelope. "Sir, from the club. Hargroves called an emergency investor meet. He's rallying against the extension." Theodore released her hand, steel returning to his posture. "Let them come. I'll speak truth." He turned to Evelyn, signing, "Go home. Safe." She shook her head, writing boldly, "I stay. Face it with you." A faint smile cracked his tension, that rare dimple flashing, stubborn, like me. The afternoon waned into tense preparation. Theodore paced, dictating letters to Ellis, while Evelyn observed from a velvet settee, her slate filling with strategies. Expose Clarence's debts, his father's shaky bank. Samuel arrived later, sent by her father with a basket of bread and cheese, his eyes wide at the opulence. He signed jokes to lighten the mood, mimicking Clarence's pompous strut until Evelyn's shoulders shook with silent laughter. Theodore joined in, his deep chuckle visible in the rise of his chest, a brief spark of humor piercing the gloom. As dusk fell, gas lamps ignited outside, casting golden halos on the avenue. A carriage arrived, Clarence, bold as brass, flanked by 2 Philadelphia suits in pinstripe vests, their faces stern with ledgers in hand. The footman ushered them to the drawing room, where Theodore waited. Evelyn discreetly in the adjoining library, peeking through the curtained archway. She read lips flawlessly. Clarence's oily baritone. "Langston, this dalliance ruins you. The girl's a liability, silent, unfit. Step back, or we pull funding." Theodore leaned on the mantel, voice steady and clear. "Dalliance? You mean respect? Hargrove, your jealousy blinds you. I've proof of your forgeries, loans to cover your gambling." The investors shifted, murmuring. Clarence blanched, his mustache drooping. "Lies. She's using you, pitying her way to fortune." But Theodore's gaze iced. "No, she stands taller than your schemes." Evelyn's pulse raced, pride swelling. She stepped into view, chin high, signing to Theodore. "Tell them truth." He nodded, translating her gestures aloud. "Miss Whittaker says love hears beyond silence." The room stilled. One investor, a greying banker with wire spectacles, cleared his throat. "Bold words, but results matter." Clarence sneered, but Theodore pressed. "The extension proceeds, with or without your doubts." The men filed out, Clarence last, his glare promising retribution. "You'll regret this," he mouthed clearly to Evelyn. But as the door shut, Theodore pulled her aside, his arm around her waist. A chaste hold, yet electric. "We held," he signed, forehead to hers. Joy flickered, tentative, their breaths sinking in the quiet. Yet victory soured with a late-night knock. Ellis delivered a whisper. Clarence fled to the docks, rumors of sabotage on the rails. Theodore's face darkened. He won't stop. Evelyn signed, "Together," linking hands. But as midnight tolled unseen, a distant whistle pierced the night, a train derailed, dread coiled. Clarence's final strike loomed, threatening to shatter their world before it fully formed. The midnight hour cloaked New York in a shroud of fog, rolling off the harbor. The distant wail of a ferry horn vibrating through the Whittaker brownstone like a warning. Evelyn paced the parlor, her grey woolen dress whispering against the floorboards, the locket at her throat, a steady weight. Theodore's carriage had sped away hours ago, bound for the rail yards where whispers of sabotage echoed like thunder. She signed to the empty room, hands slashing, "Safe," willing the word into reality. Samuel slept upstairs, exhausted from the day's tension, while Mr. Whittaker dozed in his armchair, his snores a faint rumble she felt more than heard. Across the city, Theodore's brougham rattled over uneven streets, the horses' hooves splashing through puddles that mirrored gas lamps like shattered gold. His face, etched with resolve, caught the fleeting light. At 35, he'd stared down blizzards on the plains and cutthroat bids in smoke-filled rooms. But this, Clarence's desperate lash, struck at the core of what he'd begun to rebuild. Evelyn's sign for "together" burned in his mind, her green eyes fierce in memory. He wouldn't let shadows claim it. The rail yard sprawled under the Brooklyn Bridge's iron skeleton, a labyrinth of boxcars and sidings humming with night crews. Torches sputtered, casting long shadows on stacks of ties and barrels of oil. Theodore's arrival stirred the workers, rough men in overalls and caps, their faces grimed with soot. Foreman Riley, a burly Irishman with a pipe clenched in his teeth, met him at the gate. "Mr. Langston, sir. Trouble on the east spur. Someone tampered with the switches. Points bent, rails loosened. Could have derailed the midnight freight." Theodore's blood iced. He signed nothing. Urgency propelled him forward, boots crunching gravel. Riley led the way, lanterns swinging, illuminating the sabotage. A critical junction pried apart, tools discarded nearby like careless clues. "Done recent," Riley muttered. "Smells of grudge." Theodore knelt, fingers tracing the mangled iron, mind racing to Clarence, his threats, his flight to the docks. The Tycoon's network had eyes everywhere. A tip from a dockside informant confirmed it. Hargrove, cornered and raging, had hired saboteurs to cripple the line, aiming to tank the stock and force Theodore's hand. "Round up the watchman," Theodore ordered, voice low and clear, though the night swallowed it for most. "No alarms yet. We catch him in the act." Riley nodded, dispatching men into the gloom. Theodore's pulse thrummed, not with fear, but a cold fury at the villain who'd twisted envy into destruction. Clarence, with his silk scarves and hollow boasts, threatened not just Rails, but the fragile world Evelyn deserved, a life beyond pity and whispers. Words spread like sparks on dry tinder. By dawn's grey light, Evelyn felt the shift, a messenger pounding at the door, vibrations jolting her awake. The note from Theodore, "Yards, come quick, it's ending." Heart slamming, she roused her father, who protested with frantic signs. Too dangerous, but Evelyn donned her cape, determination steeling her spine. Samuel insisted on tagging along, his lanky frame bundled in a coat too big. They hailed a cab, the city awakening to vendors and clanging bells, oblivious to the storm brewing. The yard teemed now, crews swarming to repair the damage under Riley's bark. Theodore spotted Evelyn at the fence, her face pale but unbowed. He crossed to her, signing "here" with urgent hands, then mouthing the words slowly. Relief flooded his features, mingled with the shadows under his eyes. She signed back, "What happened?" He explained in gestures and clear speech the sabotage, Clarence's trail leading to a nearby warehouse where he'd holed up with his thugs, plotting more chaos to blame on unstable management. Evelyn's eyes flashed indignation, hands forming, "Stop him!" Theodore nodded, pulling her close for a heartbeat. His arm around her shoulders, a shield against the chill. "We will, together." Samuel hovered nearby, eyes wide, but the moment grounded them, their bond a quiet fire amid the frenzy. Riley's men closed in as the sun crested, painting the yard in pale gold. Clarence emerged from the warehouse shadows, disheveled, his overcoat torn, flanked by the same brutes from the park. His mustache drooped, eyes wild with cornered rage. "Langston!" he shouted, voice cracking across the rails. "This ends your fairy tale. The board will see your woman's curse on the line." Theodore stepped forward, workers forming a loose circle, hammers and wrenches at the ready. "Your doing, Hargrove. Tools match your hired scum. The investors know your forgeries, your debts. Step down or the law drags you." Clarence lunged, but Riley's men seized him, the thugs scattering like rats. No blows this time. Constables arrived on Theodore's prior tip, badges glinting as they clapped irons on the villain. Clarence spat curses, his face twisting in defeat. "She'll ruin you. A deaf wife society laughs." Evelyn pushed through, chin high, signing to Theodore with fierce grace. "No more." He translated aloud for the onlookers, his voice booming. "Miss Whittaker says, your poison ends. Justice speaks louder than lies." The yard fell silent, then erupted in murmurs of approval, workers nodding, Riley grinning through his pipe. Clarence's glare met Evelyn's, hatred crumbling to impotence as the constables hauled him away. No trial for her or Theodore. Just the quiet unraveling of his schemes, exposed in affidavits and ledgers that would bury him in civil ruin. As the dust settled, Theodore turned to Evelyn, the yard's clamour fading. He signed "free," then pulled her into a full embrace, chaste yet profound, her head against his chest. She felt the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm syncing with hers. "You saved us," he murmured clearly, lips near her ear. Tears traced her cheeks. She signed "We did," linking their hands in the gesture for love, perfected now. The board convened that afternoon in a smoke-filled parlour, telegrams confirming the sabotage averted. Investors, swayed by proof of Theodore's vigilance, backed the extension unanimously. Whispers of scandal died, replaced by respect for the tycoon's resolve and the woman at his side. Evelyn, invited discreetly, watched from the wings, her presence a silent testament. By evening, under the bridge's arch, they walked the repaired tracks, Samuel trailing with a triumphant grin. Mr. Whittaker joined, signing gratitude that brought a lump to Theodore's throat. The Tycoon knelt before Evelyn, pulling the velvet box anew, this time a simple gold ring etched with intertwined rails. "Marry me," he said slowly, signing it too. "Build our world." Her yes came in a radiant sign, hands curving over her heart, then his. They kissed then, soft and lingering, the river's flow a silent witness. Clarence's shadow vanished, justice a quiet victory. Their love, forged in silence and steel, promised a future unbroken, empires of heart, enduring beyond the Gilded Age's gleam. 10 years had woven their quiet tapestry since that fateful dawn in the rail yard, where iron and resolve had bent fate itself. The year now stood at 1895, and New York had grown bolder, its skyline pierced by taller spires of ambition, though the Gilded Age's gleam had softened into a more measured shine. Evelyn Langston, no longer Whittaker, stood on the wide veranda of their countryside estate in Westchester, the Hudson River winding like a silver thread below. At 32, she moved with the same graceful poise, her dark curls touched with faint silver at the temples, pinned beneath a wide-brimmed hat of straw and lace. Her gown, a soft emerald silk with leg-of-mutton sleeves and a modest train, fluttered in the breeze, the fabric whispering secrets only she could feel. The estate sprawled across rolling hills, a far cry from the cramped brownstone of her youth. Theodore had built it as a sanctuary, stone walls enclosing gardens where roses bloomed unchecked, their petals a riot of crimson and pink. No more vibrations of city clamour. Here the world hummed gently, birds alighting on branches, the distant low of cattle from the stables. Evelyn's green eyes, sharper than ever, scanned the lawn where 2 children played. Their daughter, Eliza, named for Theodore's lost love, chased her younger brother, Samuel, after her own lively sibling, with a wooden hoop and stick, their laughter a silent whirlwind. She read in their open mouths and flushed cheeks. At 8 and 5, they tumbled across the grass, oblivious to the legacy their parents had forged. Inside the house, Theodore's study overlooked the same vista, maps of expanded rail lines curling across his desk like veins of the nation. At 45, the Tycoon bore the marks of time nobly, his dark hair streaked with grey, the beard fuller, framing a face etched with deeper lines from boardroom battles and tender nights. His broad shoulders filled the tailored frock coat, but the steel in his gaze had mellowed, warmed by years of shared silences. He rose now, crossing to the French doors where Evelyn waited, his steps deliberate to alert her. He signed, "Beautiful Day," his hands fluid after a decade of practice, then mouthed the words slowly, a habit unbroken. She turned, her smile radiant, signing back, "Our life," her fingers linking with his in the familiar gesture for love. They had married 6 months after Clarence's downfall, in a quiet ceremony at a chapel overlooking the park where their bond had tested fire. No grand Vanderbilt affair, just family, close friends, and the river's flow as witness. Evelyn's father, Mr. Whittaker, now retired on a modest pension from Theodore's generosity, had beamed from the front pew, his hands signing blessings throughout. Samuel, her brother, had grown into a strapping young man of 26, managing a branch of the Langston dry goods line in Philadelphia, his quick wit a staple at family gatherings. He visited often, regaling the children with exaggerated tales of rail adventures, his signs broad and comical, drawing peals of joy from Eliza and young Samuel. Their love had endured, not as a fragile bloom, but a sturdy oak, roots deepened by trials. Theodore had learned her language fully, employing tutors and practicing in stolen moments amid empire building. The Union Pacific extension had launched to acclaim, his fortune swelling, but he'd poured portions into schools for the deaf, silent worlds given voice through Evelyn's quiet advocacy. She taught there part-time, her slate replaced by illustrated primers, inspiring girls like her younger self to claim their places. No children cried unheard in their home. Theodore's signs wove through lullabies, his deep voice a rhythmic anchor even if lost to her ears. Yet shadows lingered in memory. Clarence Hargrove had paid dearly for his venom. Ruined by exposed forgeries and sabotage charges, he'd fled to obscurity in the Midwest, his banking dreams shattered. Whispers reached them years later, a broken man, scraping by as a clerk, his once proud moustache unkempt, envy festering into regret. No prison bars for the protagonists, as fate decreed, just the slow erosion of ambition unchecked. Mr. Whitaker often signed over supper, "Justice comes quiet, like dawn." Theodore nodded, his arm around Evelyn, the weight of that truth a balm. As the sun dipped toward the hills, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, the children raced up the veranda steps, Eliza tugging her father's coat, young Samuel signing "Story time" with eager fists. Theodore scooped them up, one in each arm, his laughter rumbling visibly. Evelyn joined, her hand on his back, feeling the steady vibration of his joy. They settled in the wicker chairs, the family a circle unbroken. Eliza traced signs on her palm, words for river, home forever, while young Samuel mimicked his uncle's old jokes, twisting train into elephant until tears of silent mirth streamed down Evelyn's face. Theodore caught her eye over the children's heads, signing, "I love you," the motion intimate, profound. She replied in kind, their palms pressing together, a decade's tenderness in the touch. The Gilded Age had faded, but their world endured, forged in silence, tempered by steel, blooming in the quiet spaces where hearts spoke loudest. As stars pricked the twilight, Evelyn leaned against him, the river's flow a eternal companion. No regrets, only this, a life reclaimed, a love that echoed beyond words, wrapping them in nostalgia's warm embrace. As the stars fully claimed the twilight sky over the Langston estate, Evelyn and Theodore lingered on the veranda, the children's playful exhaustion finally lulling them into dreams upstairs. The river below murmured its endless song, a gentle current that mirrored the unyielding flow of their lives together. 10 years had transformed not just their world, but the very essence of what it meant to connect beyond words. Evelyn rested her head on Theodore's shoulder, feeling the subtle rise and fall of his breathing, a rhythm that needed no sound to speak volumes. He signed softly against her palm, "Forever," the gesture as familiar as the dawn. In the quiet that followed, reflections surfaced like fireflies in the dusk. Their story, born in the glittering shadows of 1885 New York, taught lessons etched deep into the soul. First, that love defies the cruelest barriers, silence, society, envy, not through grand declarations, but through patient gestures and unwavering eyes. Evelyn's deafness, once a chain, became the bridge that drew Theodore from his armored isolation, reminding him that true strength lies in vulnerability. He, in turn, showed her that power need not crush, but uplift, turning a tycoon's steel into a scaffold for dreams. Perseverance emerged as their greatest ally, a quiet force against the tempests of scandal and sabotage. Clarence Hargrove's downfall whispered a vital truth. Malice unmasked crumbles under its own weight, while integrity endures, forging paths where none seemed possible. No arrests marred their journey. Instead, justice unfolded through resolve and revelation, proving that righteousness requires no courtroom drama, only the courage to stand firm. And in the end, family, blood and chosen, wove the strongest net, catching them through every fall. Theodore's hand tightened around hers, his blue eyes catching the lantern light. "We've built more than rails," he mouthed slowly, the words a private vow. Evelyn nodded, her green gaze steady, signing back with a smile that lit the night. Their children, Eliza and young Samuel, slept soundly, heirs to a legacy of empathy and empire, where silence was no flaw but a unique symphony. This tale of the Gilded Age, with its opulent balls and iron ambitions, reminds us all that the heart's language outlasts any era's clamour. It calls us to listen, not with ears alone, but with the soul, to the unspoken stories around us. In a world quick to judge, choose kindness. In silence, find profound connection. In adversity, hold to hope. Their triumph wasn't in wealth or whispers hushed, but in a love that bloomed eternal, proving no obstacle too vast when two souls align. If this story moved you, pause for a moment and reflect. What barrier in your own life could bridge with a single gesture? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What touched you most about Evelyn and Theodore's journey? Did their enduring bond inspire a memory of your own? And to show you've journeyed to the very end with them, write the word endure in your comment. It'll let me know you felt the full weight of their victory and help spread this tale to others seeking inspiration. For more stories of romance forged in unexpected fires, like tales of resilient hearts in historical shadows or whispers of fate across forbidden lines, check the cards pinned above or explore the playlist. Your engagement keeps these narratives alive. Likes, shares, and subscriptions fuel the next chapter in someone else's story. Thank you for joining Evelyn and Theodore. May their light guide your path. Until the next adventure.